Digital platforms designed for leisure are now reliably triggering negative psychological states in their users. The failure happens exactly here. The constant, repetitive friction of infinite browsing transforms what should be relaxation into genuine cognitive fatigue. This contrasts with the historical baseline of media consumption. In a household where television provides a singular, active broadcast, there is no burden of choice. Conversational terms like mindless scrolling don't quite capture the specific mechanic at work. Researchers refer to this as Netflix syndrome, a behavioral failure mode occurring entirely during the pre-viewing selection stage. The difficulty of choosing what to watch is a quantifiable source of psychological harm that undermines the product's core value proposition. A 2025 study published in the Asian Journal for Public Opinion Research provides the empirical data for this phenomenon. The researchers focused on South Korea, a market with a 99.5% internet utilization rate and a high density of competing streaming services. The methodology isolated 443 paid Netflix subscribers. Filtering for paid accounts ensures the data reflects highly engaged users rather than casual observers. They used structural equation modeling to map the variables of the user experience. This mathematical model isolates the specific factors causing users to abandon a platform. By treating human frustration as a dataset, we can measure the specific psychological weights that push users away. This diagram illustrates the structural model of the user's decision-making process. We'll populate it with the study's data, starting with the final outcome. On the far right is the dependent variable researchers were looking for, OTT stress. The immediate precursor to that stress is choice deferral. A vector connects the delay in selection to the resulting fatigue and time pressure. The path coefficient of 0.624 indicates a strong positive correlation. The data shows that as the delay in selection increases, so does the reported anxiety. This mirrors trends documented in online retail, specifically the negative emotions that arise when consumers hesitate before a purchase. Choice deferral acts as a bridge. It transforms a leisure activity into a stressor, forcing us to identify the forces that push a user onto this path in the first place. What actually causes a user to defer their choice? The common industry assumption is that too much content is the primary culprit. However, the study identifies a more powerful variable, affective ambivalence. This is the simultaneous experience of conflicting emotions. It's an internal tug-of-war between the desire to watch something and the fear that a selection will be a waste of time. The researchers measured this through 3 specific indicators of indecision and evaluative tension: feeling conflicted, feeling indecisive, and weighing complex pros and cons. The mobile-first nature of modern streaming consumption exacerbates this. Without the physical constraints of a television, users become more risk-averse, viewing their choice as a significant investment of limited attention. With a path coefficient of 0.591, the data identifies this internal conflict as the primary driver of Netflix syndrome in this model. The significant hurdle in streaming isn't just visual clutter on the screen, it is the internal emotional paralysis happening inside the user's mind. The secondary driver is content overload. Having too many options leads to difficulty processing information, which contributes to decision fatigue. When we compare the mathematical weights, the disparity is clear. The internal conflict of ambivalence at 0.591 is significantly more impactful than the volume of content itself, which sits at 0.305. This suggests that designers cannot fix the problem simply by reducing the number of titles displayed on a screen. Finally, there is a third factor that acts as a buffer: social capital. Interactions with friends and family provide external cues that bypass the platform's algorithm. These recommendations act as a cognitive shortcut, making it easier to commit to a choice. While the effect is statistically significant, the low beta value shows it is currently the weakest factor in the model, suggesting its potential to reduce stress remains largely untapped. The complete model shows that OTT stress is driven by internal emotional conflict and content volume, with social recommendations providing only a minor defense. These findings have immediate implications for the future of streaming interfaces. A static catalog UI assumes content volume is the only hurdle. It fails to account for the primary obstacle of affective ambivalence. The authors of the study suggest that platforms should focus entirely on intervention, shifting the user's emotional state by encouraging faster decisions. We see this in features like Play Something, which attempts to bypass internal conflict by removing the user's agency entirely. The next generation of streaming UI will be judged by how effectively it helps a user commit to a decision. One path involves leveraging social capital more effectively, using trusted peer networks to cut through indecision. If platforms fail to address the mathematical reality of choice deferral, they continue to manufacture stress in an environment meant for leisure. At a certain point, the psychological cost becomes just too high, and the user simply abandons the ecosystem. A media ecosystem fundamentally fails when it forces the user to expend so much psychological capital choosing their digital content that they no longer have the energy to watch it.